For the final segment of this standing seam video, I'm going to show you the install of the pans as well as the flashings that we need to finish at the walls. So here I'm just putting clips in place and screwing the pan off. Now if you're using a robotic seamer here, you're actually going to want to run that seamer first because it pulls the seams so tight, then put your clips in. But again, I'm just doing it by hand. It's not going to pull it tight enough to be an issue. So now that that pan's in place, you can see that ear that I had left down on the bottom. I'm going to fold that around, and that creates a nice closed off portion on the bottom so you can't see into the open portion of the standing seam. And these are the first lock seamers. I'm creating that first lock that I showed you before. I'm just folding and creasing that underneath and work my way up, and then I just go back through a second time to make sure everything's locked in tight. Now I've switched over to the second lock seamer, and this is going to create a full mechanical lock standing seam roof. So again, I just go back through a second time and make sure everything's finished off. Nice way to make sure you have your valley where you need to be. You don't have to take a bunch of measurements, just some builder's paper or craft paper. We cut this 21 inches wide. We laid a pan right on top of it and scored it. So bring that up into place, set it right alongside this pan. Just take your marker and just make a mark. Two spots. Right where your pan needs to be hemmed around your valley. Now you take this over to the work table, connect that line, score that off with a straight blade, and now you have your angle. You can set this right on top of your next standing seam pan so you have a nice crisp valley hem. We took this piece of paper here, we cut it on that line at the marks we made. I transcribed that over onto my pan, and then I added 3/4 of an inch because just like my rake edge, I want to be able to hem 3/4 of an inch onto my valley. So now I have my fold line and my cut line. I've started to prep this cut here. I will finish it off. So now we've got this pan that goes into the valley. We've got that mark transcribed on here that we made from the builder's paper. We cut it 3/4 of an inch long. We hemmed it over underneath using the Wilco roller, the roller bender. And in our case, we use a brake as well. But anyways, this piece is ready to go. What we're gonna do is slide it up in to the valley, set it on top of the pan next to it, slide it into place, hook it onto that valley, downward pressure. Nice tight fit. We lock it on this side, and that is a beautiful fit right there. Now I'll just go through and lock this seam off, screw in the top, and a clip over there. Now all the standing seam panels that are put on, I just finished hemming that bottom edge, closing it off all the way. We went ahead and we double locked all of our seams. A couple things to point out with that is we choose to mostly use a set of hand seamers for that. You can get a electronic seamer or a robot, as they might call it, if you've got a real long roof. A lot of what we do is 10 feet or less, so we find that the hand seamers work fine for us. If you want a longer run, like you may find it's a little bit easier for you, gives you a little bit straighter. The hand seamers are going to give you a little bit of a tiny ripple there, and it's hardly noticeable. So we went through and finished this all off, and you'll see there's a couple areas where there's just a little bit of a scratch mark where we were seaming. There's like maybe a small scratch in the valley there. And this would be the point in time, either now or when you put your wall flashing on, to just touch up those areas with that touch-up paint. Because again, we're using aluminum. It's not going to rust, but at least we'll protect the paint finish by just getting that paint pen which the manufacturers will sell that matches. And we're gonna go ahead and go do our wall flashings.
Here I hold my sidewall flashing in place and I make a couple marks, as you see. Those marks are so I know where to line up my Z flashing. I'm marking the Z flashing right now and fold it down at the bottom to close off the bottom portion underneath the sidewall flashing. The sidewall flashing hooks onto this Z flashing. The Z flashing screwed down with a butyl tape underneath it, and this is to stop any water from going from the pan sideways underneath the sidewall flashing. And I'll install that here.
Now you'll see I've got my Z flashing cut, and that's to receive my sidewall flashing that will go right up against this wall. What we need to be concerned with is water that gets here running back underneath that Z flashing. What we do to secure down the Z flashing, keep that out, is we use a butyl tape. So the butyl tape is just a really sticky, and you apply it across the bottom side, and then we'll screw it down onto the roof. As you can see in my previous shop, we bent this around to create a completely closed off area. We don't want to leave this open on the bottom for birds and bats and everything to get into. So we close that right off. Butyl tape on the bottom will secure it in place. I'll show you that now.
Pretty simple process here. The butyl tape has a release paper on one side. So you just put it on, rip it off to length, and then apply pressure to get it to adhere, and then pull that release paper off.
And I actually don't put butyl on this portion. Just the way you would flash a window, if water did get underneath this, I don't want to trap it here. I want to let it flow back out. So I just put butyl on the side, peel that off. I've got my marks on the roof for where my sidewall flashing is going to land. I'll line it up right in line with that. Stick it down. Grab one of my stainless screws, or a couple rather, and fasten this in place. Now that Z flashing is in place, you'll see how this operates. That sidewall, again, locks on top of it. It's fastened in against the wall. Ideally, you have a flashing tape over the top of that as well. So I'm going to line this up in a way that, just like with our valley, I want to actually create a pocket up there in case water got in at that corner. So scribe this corner onto here so I know what the angle is. And I'll go ahead and make a cut, fold this up the wall, fold the other piece behind it. I'll take care of that now, and then we'll show you how to put it in place. So we've got our sidewall flashing all bent up. You can see we scribed that corner. We cut and folded this up behind to create a pocket there for no water to get through. And on the bottom here, we hemmed it along the bottom of our Z flashing and along our side. Rounded off these corners and left this tab a little bit long in case the siders or whoever else can be doing any waterproofing here wants to slide some type of flashing behind here. So we just basically put this up in place, slide it until it's tight, throw a couple screws in it. Sidewalls on, we just work our way across. We set Z flashing in place for our end wall. We'll go off and show you how to wrap this corner. Now we have this end wall in place. We cut a 45-degree angle at our corners just for looks. Wrap this corner around the side. Will come down and get cut plumb. So we'll slide this into place now. Same thing, put a couple screws on the top of it. And instead of taking measurements, I always like to just make marks because some things aren't going to be a perfectly 9-degree angle the way it was framed. So I prepped the top of this sidewall pan just like I did here. And I'll put this up, slide it nice and tight into place, and then I can come down to the bottom. Come down to the bottom here and I can mark exactly where it needs to be cut. And then I can take it back down off the roof or over the shop bench, make my cuts. Here I will also make a 45-degree angle cut. Now again, it might not be perfectly 45, so same thing as I did before. This will be lined up right where it needs to be. And I just mark where the inside corner is, so I know where my cut has to connect to. I'll take care of that now. So you've seen the sidewall, you see the end wall transition over the sidewall, now a sidewall over an end wall. And once you understand the foundations of it, that you need Z-flashing, that you need a end wall and a sidewall, you need to lock them in, you make 45-degree angles at your outside corners, your inside corners, wrap what's underneath and plumb cut what's over the top. It's a lot of basic carpentry skills. If you already have that, you should have the confidence that you could probably get your way through this. You may have to look up a couple videos online, you may have to ask a couple questions, but it's all manageable. So anyways, we've got this piece ready. This is our sidewall. We'll get this put in place. And as you can see, we've got a plumb cut at this corner here. We've got this 45-degree angle coming down, and we'll do the same thing we've done everywhere else. Put a couple screws in the top of it. And now you can see that as this flashing snakes its way across the roof. I'll go ahead and I'll finish the rest of this with Z-flashing and end wall, and then we'll just discuss a couple things to wrap this up. And here we're working on the top of the valley where the end wall flashing meets on that inside corner. The roof on the left is a steeper pitch than the roof on the right. So what that means is the end wall flashing on the left side will sit further down the roof system, with the right side sitting over the top. What we want to do is we want to complete that left side first. There's many ways to do this. This is one way we like to, is just bring up a mock-up, a small piece. Mock up what you want to do so you're not taking a piece of end wall and cutting it all up and wasting maybe a $20 to $50 piece of metal. So we've got this mocked up here. And as you can see, we went ahead and we put the Z-flashing in place, making sure it's closed off in that valley. And we don't want bees, birds, bats getting in up underneath this end wall flashing. So we've got this mocked up. I'll take this now and I'll go get the measurements put onto a full piece of end wall. We'll cut it and we'll put it in place. We've got this piece of end wall flashing ready. We've got it creased for the valley. We've got this ear folded around for the inside corner. And we actually went ahead and hemmed where it's going to sit on the outside here of the rake here. So I'm going to get this piece fit on the Z flashing. Slid tight into the corner. I'll go ahead and put some screws in the top of this, and then we'll prep for the next piece with our Z-flashing. Inside corner there, I went ahead and cut a piece and figured out the angle. I put that measurement onto here, and same thing with the right side. This piece is cut and ready to go.
This will be the last piece of end wall flashing. I'll slide that in now so you can see how it fits. Now that the roof is complete, you might want to go through and do some touch-up work. So first we talked about the touch-up pen. You go through, and that's a paint pen that you're going to order from your manufacturer when you get your metal. You can go through and touch up any little scratches. I made a couple on this install, so that's something I would do. The other thing is, especially if it's one of your first times doing standing seam, you may find that your flashing's not sitting completely tight in a couple areas. I'm not recommending putting a ton of rivets, but one rivet gun, to hold the flashing down in the corner where you want things to look a little bit tighter and neater isn't going to hurt a thing. You can get some color match caulk and just touch up the tiniest little bit on top of that rivet. If you find it's necessary and you're flashing your end wall and side wall, that closed hem that goes underneath, if you need it closed off more because it wasn't in the first place, you can go through your seaming pliers and just slowly close that off. Just be careful that you don't crease your metal there. This will complete the roof system. As you can see here, we've really hit on everything throughout this roof. And if you could just picture this as a final product on one of your jobs, it's totally attainable. It's a very satisfying job to do. It's not your typical shingle job. And this will set you apart from everybody else. So hopefully you learned something today. There's many ways to do this. This is just one of them. Take care.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to open up the floor, see if anyone has any questions. Just unmute yourself. Any questions? Come on, there must be some. That was a lot of work.
Tony, I got a question for you. I was
It's definitely different doing this for video. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious to see why you put the screw at the top of the flashing, like literally right at the top of the flashing. Is that just so whenever you screw, if you screw in too far, it won't bend the metal and go down the trim?
Yeah, so you're talking about like this end wall flashing up here?
Exactly. Yep.
I don't know if you can see me. Is that what you're talking about? Okay. So the reason would be is I don't know how somebody, like if we're just doing the roof and we're not actually building the rest of the house, how far down somebody's going to come with their, with whatever their siding material is. Ideally, I would like them to leave it up from the crease in that metal at least an inch. So this way I just basically put it as high as possible to know that there's no issue there. And then in this case, being that we're using a product with the membrane built into the sheathing, we would just tape over the top of that. But if we were using a house wrap, same thing, we'd come down over the top, and it basically just keeps everything up and away from wherever water would sit or travel.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Everyone's ready to go out there and do this? Well, thank you everyone for joining us in the last segment. And hopefully, you guys, there's more to see. If you want to go visit the exhibit hall, if you haven't already, you can do that. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. Thanks again, Tony.
Same thing. If I can chime in, if anybody thinks of something later on and they want to reach out through you or through, I think my website or emails on there as well.
Yes.
They're working on a project, or if it's one of your suppliers and they're trying to figure out, what's a good way to spec certain materials for somebody, reach out. No problem.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.